And we're live! Woo-hoo-hoo! So excited for you guys to join us today on Friday. Oh, boy, I needed this Friday. I was looking forward to this Friday, but we are here in Rocket Fuel Expert Spotlight, where we're taking the opportunity to really connect you with people who execute with excellence. Now, remember, the Rocket Fuel community is about uniting entrepreneurs who love to serve at that level, right? Those entrepreneurs who really know they just try. I mean, we all try and do our very, very, very best, right? But they want to also work with other people that are always trying to be in this mindset of continuous improvement, right? Yeah. And I find that that's not everybody. It's not everybody. So here we are, uniting kumbaya with entrepreneurs that execute with excellence. And the purpose of these spotlights is to pull out members and to talk to them so that you know why they are hashtag Rocket Fuel. So today, we got some pillow talk.
Yes.
I'm making up my own shit here, Naketa. But
anyway. I'm vibing with it, so it's good for me.
Oh yeah, thank goodness. In order to be on here, you just gotta be able to deal with this over here.
I love it.
Oh, well, and we love you. I want to introduce you to the marvelous Naketa Ren Thigpen. She is a relationship and balance. Would you call yourself a coach, advisor?
Yeah,
guru?
So I'll accept all of those, but yeah. I'm known as the balance and relationship advisor because I blend clinical, sexology, trauma, and coaching modalities all together. So I do all of it, but we do it in a really, unique blend that we call joy mapping. So it falls under balance and relationship advisor to make things simple for everyone.
All right. So this sounds really, guys, if that didn't intrigue you already, like stick around, right? Okay. So this is really interesting. I mean, is this its own vertical, its own thing, or did you kind of mush things together? Like, tell me about this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker by profession for over 2 decades before I got into the modalities of modern coaching techniques. I bring all of that with me. So it is a fusing of evidence-based practices from psychology, sociology, anthropology, like all things human behavior, with kind of the understood, unique, transformational expression of coaching modalities as we know them, the real coaching modalities as we know them now, since coaching is kind of an unregulated field. So right. I've blended all that together with what I've known from working with over 10,000 professionals before I became an entrepreneur in the various ways that I did, and really seeing how we could use coaching as kind of the, as preaching to the choir here, but the questioning of questions and using it more uniquely in a way to really help to propel people into their 10.0 version of themselves. So it's new.
Love the 10.0 version.
Yeah.
10.0.
Forget 2.0. 10.0.
I love it. So how did you start this? Because obviously, you have this whole journey prior to even being an entrepreneur that kind of got you interested in going this direction. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, honestly, as a clinician, I loved what I did. I was really good at what I did. I wasn't in love with it. And so for anyone who's been in any kind of relationship, and I'm assuming most of the people in our group are well over 18. So you are not new to being infatuated, being in lust with someone, all of that. And then realizing I love you. I've become fond of you. I appreciate and respect you, but I'm not in love with you. Right? That passion is not doing it for me. And that's kind of how I felt about my industry.
We need some comments. if you've ever felt that feeling. Shit, I wasn't in love with some of the first things that I even did as an entrepreneur.
Right.
And realizing that, right? That's a big, big distinction to be able to say, okay, I'm enjoying it. And sometimes at some point you enjoyed the initial process and then it was just this isn't so fun anymore. And then it was I got into it for the wrong reasons. Part of it is a lot of knowing about yourself.
Yes.
Right. Wow.
Big time, which is why it's crucial. Our company is a global personal development company on purpose. And we shifted, we came from the holistic professional leadership development space. We were trying to be all things growth and development. And although it's all interconnected, the person inside the professional is where it all like really begins. So we really niched down into that space and then just kind of created our own lane working with our power couples and our married women entrepreneurs.
So yeah, but how did that come about? So you have professional development and then you're like, oh yeah, let's just throw a little sexology in there. I mean, that isn't like, well, clearly this is what you talk about in the corporate world. I mean, how did you infuse that in and why did that become an important part of your unique approach?
That's a great question. So what was happening is, give somebody long enough, they tell on themselves, right? If they feel safe enough to do it with you, or if they're just kind of in a crisis mode that they don't even know they're in, and they're being like really tangential and sharing all the things, they'll slip out what's really going on, what's kind of underneath, like, right. And we've all had those, you come from corporate. So, you were sitting in those boardrooms and you're like, okay, clearly you're not having enough sex. Like you're having issues at home, right? Like we know it based on how they were, projecting out things in their tone and their demeanor. Some were coming like super angry with it because they were not releasing enough oxytocin, right? Like,
have you guys noticed that? Anybody who's listening, have you noticed that? Have you ever thought that, like in a meeting, like, ooh, girl needs to get some. And
it, we know it. We may not say it, but
yeah, gotten some this afternoon.
Exactly. Like, she happy today, or he is acting like a human today. Like, okay, you must have turned things up. And that was just like watching and listening, being an active listener to it. But then also as people became more trusting with me, and just, opened up and became more vulnerable, they would start to say like, yeah, I'm having some leadership issues, some team management issues, conflict with communicating with my ideal customer, like that kind of front end, those front door safe ways to enter into a relationship with someone who's a expert, like a balance and relationship advisor or a coach or an executive coach, whatever the title is. Those are the safe doors. But as they came through those doors into my sacred space, my kind of kitchen, because the kitchen is where all those deep conversations happen.
Yeah.
Right. Like that, as they kind of flow through the trusting part of the house with me into the back room in the kitchen, they would start to say like, listen, the same stuff that's going on with me at work with, not being able to hear my team members, them not necessarily feeling like I'm listening to them. My partner is saying the same thing. My kids are, saying back to me, Mom, you never listen. Dad, you never pay attention, right? Like in their own way, in their own language, it was coming up. And then as it started to unravel, they would talk about the other relationships, not just with their lover, but also with their parents and with their siblings that they weren't getting along with anymore. The sister they haven't talked to in 10 years. And just all, because we say intimacy is 360 degrees. It's not just your lover.
Yeah.
And it starts with you. And every relationship that matters to you is that 360 degrees, including those professional relationships down to your client or customer. So that's where it was coming from. They were just telling me what they wanted more of. And as we built the deepened part of our relationship, I got more bold about being like, well, I am not only a trauma specialist, I am a sexologist. I had been that for a very long time.
Interesting.
I wouldn't open that door up unless someone was, providing me a safe space to be like, well, I wish we had more passionate nights. And I'm like, oh, do you? Well, let's, we can talk about that. Right?
So when you studied sexology, is that right?
Yeah.
So why did you take those courses? What was your expectation as to how you were going to use that?
Yeah, kind of the pivot of that for me was trauma is the root of my expertise. All things trauma informed care. Like that's where I grew up in that space of understanding trauma, how it was affected people, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all the layers, including the vicarious trauma that people kind of dissipate. So what we're seeing in our healthcare workers right now because of COVID, they're having a lot of vicarious trauma from seeing all the death and the loss and getting fussed out by the families who can't come see their loved ones, understanding that they're frustrated, but they're also burnt out from seeing all this death and loss and feeling out of control. That vicarious trauma has the same impact on all of your relationships as if you were sexually abused, if you were in an intimate partner violent situation, right? Like if you were challenged by that, if you were physically abused by someone that you trusted, all of that still happens for someone who's vicariously traumatized. So the way we define trauma has been very interesting in the broader kind of public space. But with me knowing that and working as a trauma clinician for so long, I knew it was impacting people in the bedroom. How could it not? Right. Like your ability. And when I say the bedroom, I don't just mean with your lover. I mean with your acknowledgement of what you need for your body, of what you want, when you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel sexy and vivacious and curvy, even with cellulite, even with freckles in places that weren't there when you were 20, right? Like all the things that are coming up as we age.
Oh, sorry.
Right? Like, but all of it was tied together. So I knew that from the deep-seated kind of clinical part of it. I wasn't necessarily sure that I would ever, quite honestly, be able to bring it forward into the work that we do now, because we were attracting people as high-level entrepreneurs and high-level execs that are used to posturing, that are used to coming fully unreadable, right? Like, I'm the best, I'm a beast in the discussion, right? And I wanted them to be in a safe space where they could be the best, be a beast, but still continue the conversation to feeling like that on the inside. And the people that matter to them also being able to say, without there being a camera present, or having the need to kind of protect the reputation of that person because they're family, because you know how we do. I can talk about my family, but you can't talk about my family, right? Right? Like
being started.
Right? Like, like I can say they are no good, but you better not ever. And so we wanted their family, their friends, their colleagues, their clients to also be able to say, without worried about how other people would see their family business, is like, no, Naketa really is amazing and a beast, and she's a little crazy. And she, she gets a little moody, and she's a little special, and she shows up for us, right? Hashtag special spice, right? Like, and she shows up for us fully because she's done so much self-work on her. So you can be literally in this parentheses. That's what I should have put there, like parentheses and AND is the space that we all should live in, but you can't live there authentically if you're not willing to do your own self-healing and work. So you can have these amplified, intimate relationships and have people speak about you privately the way that they would speak about you publicly.
Yeah. And that's amazing. I mean, clearly, naturally, you must be the person that people just open up to, and you're like, holy shit. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that information. I mean, you have to be that sort of personality. I mean, did you find, like, before even doing this, you were kind of like, all right, well, thank you for that extra information that I didn't expect, but why does everybody tell me these things?
I went through those. I've been this person since I was young, right? I'm an empath. I'm an empath naturally, so I absorb a lot, and people are attracted to the understanding that I'm inherently compassionate, even before I understood like what that meant and how it was showing up. I'm an intercessor, prayer warrior, so people who don't know that are also attracted to that spiritual side of me, not knowing what's pulling them towards me, and I honor it. I honor it as a gift that I have full responsibility over. I'm laughing at, it looks like Alicia, thank you, Alicia, in the chat. So are you kidding? I've told people to go home and get laid.
I know. I was waiting to show that.
I was smiling at that. That actually is me. I have been that person. The younger high school version of me was probably considered, inappropriate, because I would say that like, oh, you just need some dick. I mean, that's just it. I would say, depending on the person, like I would say things like that.
Right.
And then, I became a professional. I understood more.
Now I can use the word dick professionally.
Right. Like I can encourage you to use all the tools at your disposal, in the way that you
I just realized my parents are probably watching this show. Sorry, Mom, Dad, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. And they're like, how you think you got here?
I know. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. Before we get into stuff even more deep, just in case people can't stay for this whole thing, I just want to give you the opportunity to get Naketa's information if this is intriguing. Obviously, come back, definitely watch the replay if you have to pop off. But in Rocket Fuel, in these expert spotlight interviews, you have the opportunity to text to receive episode show notes. So it's going to be like, the Cliff Notes version of some of the hot things that we're talking about today. And so you can text RF 103 to 411-321 if you're here in the US to receive the show notes and any expert little value bombs that we may have about marital relationships, business, all that jazz. Honestly, even if you're not in business together, I mean, what you're talking about is really, it could be the business of running your household and being a power couple in your home, right?
Absolutely. Most of our couples, actually, they're entrepreneurs, but they don't necessarily work together. We do have some that do, but they have their own individual professional careers. Some might not even consider themselves entrepreneur because they work inside like a law firm, but they have to get their own book of business. So they're working as like a micro business owner. That counts for us because you get the nuances of what it means to have to be completely self-sufficient in not only your relationship building and your connecting and all the stuff that brings up for you, to have to be on all the time and then wanting to come home and just turn it off and be you, but then maybe working in a specific space in your life where your partner, your forever love, doesn't allow you to turn off because they have their own challenges that they haven't worked through. And they're like, well, I need you to be perfect when you come home too. You can't just be perfect in the world, right? And so there's clashing that happens, or all of that.
I find that really interesting. For those of you that don't know, I do work with my husband. He likes to say that he works for me, but that's because I started my business before I met him. So when he did, come into the business, I had been in business for 7-8 years already. But now at this point, I feel like it's together. No matter what we do, whether we're working on the same projects, or the same vertical part of the business, division of the business, or he's doing his own thing, it's all in support of our overall objective, and we have to make these decisions together and such. But when he first joined, he was our director of operations and was technically reporting directly to me. And it was interesting that I loved that he was comfortable enough to say this, right? But he was like, all right, okay. I mean, we couldn't not talk about work. Right. I mean, we're talking about work all the time. We're in the office, and thank goodness the office was a physical, like, different place. Come back from the office, still talking about it during dinner, like everything, because of course, like, our businesses are our lives. Like, hopefully our lives are supporting our business is supporting the lifestyle that we want and stuff like that. But basically said, okay, he said to me, I have to say one thing. Let's create a rule that the moment my head is on a pillow, I no longer work for you. And I was like, oh, all right. And then I noticed he would come into work with a pillow hat. And I was just like, what?
I would say that is a smart man.
No, but I appreciated that we were able to communicate enough that he threw up the flag and said, like, there has to be a stopping point. And then we pushed it back even more. It's like, okay, well, if we're in the office, let's keep it there, unless there are critical things to really talk about. But when we're home, we're home. Of course, it makes it easier once you have children at home to take care of. There are other things to distract. But when you don't have those distractions, it's so easy for it to kind of push through. So what do you recommend for folks that are literally every day like,
especially post-COVID, right? And not that we're truly post-COVID, but, coming to this space where it's been almost a year now, and a lot of people who had the brick and mortar office to escape to no longer have those buffers of traffic and transit time to go to your point. Like, you guys had a physical space to be like, okay, that's over there. When we walk through these doors of this home, it's a little bit different. Now, everything's in the house, right? The kids, school, counseling, athletics for your pets, everything is in the dining room, or some version of that. So creating boundaries is crucial, whether you have, physical buffers where you have to travel to or not. Having boundaries in your marriage for yourself, separating from working together for a second, because that's another layer, which we can definitely touch on. But just having that, I give kudos to your husband for putting up a boundary of this is enough.
I thought
You
you were
know?
going to say for putting up with you.
No, no. Well, you know,
I was
there's
like,
that
well,
too.
Steve.
There's that too, right? Because he knows parts about you that we don't, right? And vice versa. But like having that boundary of like, I'm here for you. I love you. I want to help. I want to continue this business that we're creating together, regardless of who's like the leader in the business, matters to me. Even if he wasn't in the business, your happiness matters to me. And so does my space. So does my peace. So does my me time, so that I can fill up and be fully available for you the next day when, you know, there's things going on. So really having a boundary is really crucial. And boundaries look different for each couple. There's no judgment on how you decide to do it, but you do want to communicate it. So for deepening your connection and kind of creating these boundaries, I have a catchphrase that's literally called CATCH, catch. So if you will allow me, I would love to give it to you.
Yeah,
Nettie says boundaries are magical. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
So tell me, what am I writing here?
CATCH. I said H. Okay. Like I can't talk. And this is really for catching and keeping your forever love, right? So if someone is here and you are listening to this and you are not in relationship, this super applies to you as you're working on your own self-healing and your own self-development. And especially if you're wanting to catch, you know, the person you're trying to attract to you as your person that's compatible with helping you to become even greater than you already are on your own. And if you're in a relationship, this is how we try to prevent maybe an unnecessary separation, right? Like I'm not talking about the separations where it needed to happen. Congratulations for you finally kicking that person out the door, because sometimes that is important.
Yeah.
About the healthy ones that you just want to, you know, create some better sustainability and stability around for your love and your relationships. So yes.
So is this a program? Is this
an acronym?
An acronym? Okay,
yes.
So it's for I didn't acronize it. Right.
It's all right.
CAT. So what is it for again?
This is for. Yep, it's for deepening your connections. But I'll break down the acronym for you.
Okay, yeah, break it down. That's what I wanted to do. All right.
So the first C in catch is all about being consistent with whatever you have admitted to yourself or to others. Because remember, this is for you first, and then you parse it out in every relationship. Whatever you've said that you're going to complete. So if you said, we can pick on something real small right now, like doing the dishes. So if you say that you're going to do the dishes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, barring understandable emergencies and urgent situations, be consistent in doing that. Like make sure that you complete what you complete. Because if you're that person that starts something, and you can apply this to anything, I'm picking on something really small and neutral, not emotional purpose. But if you're that person that says like, yeah, I'm gonna do that, and you do it for 2 or 3 weeks, and the other person or the other people in your life at work, at home, wherever are expecting you to own this, and you just drop the ball and it becomes a thing you did as one-offs or a couple of times, they can't rely on you. So they can't trust you. And if I can't trust you, I'm definitely not going even further into allowing myself to be vulnerable with you and to grow with you, right? Because you've proven to me you can't be consistent. That means that I can't rely on you and trust you to do the bigger things that aren't just like doing the dishes, right? So if you work with someone, if you work with your forever love in business, this is super crucial, right? Like if you, I'll pick on you because you picked on yourself, Wanda. Yeah. If you ask, if you told your husband, you know, in the business part of your life, you know, hey, you know, I'm going to take care of all of the connection calls that lead to potentially clarifying who's a partner versus who's a client. I'll take care of that for the business. And then you guys are having your monthly kind of check-ins and analyzing growth and revenue and all that. And he's like, oh, well, you know, our numbers went down, whatever. You said you were going to hit, I'm making up numbers, 12, you know, connect calls a week, whatever. So what's going on there? And you're like, oh, well, I did 2 last week. I had 1 the week before. I just didn't feel like it this week.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it was like that was a verbal commitment, a promise, and you broke that commitment. And although it's not good to break that commitment for any relationship, but I could see with your personal relationship, it like is even more damaging.
It's super damaging, especially if you are an ambitious woman. If I come home, move the business over for a minute. If I come home to my forever love that I can't trust because they haven't been consistent, I'm going to do what ambitious women do. I'm going to make everything my responsibility. Now
Oh,
it's all
yeah.
on me, right? Now I'm overextended. I'm overgiving. I have this expectation in my
I gotta
mind.
do everything around here.
Everything.
Right.
And the reality is, for it to be done consistently and correctly, you might actually have to, because that other person has shown you that they can't be consistent. So if you're showing up that way for your person, just think it's like that for them too. Like they feel like they can't go further with you in the relationship on an emotional, intimate level because you're not being consistent in the things that you claim you're going to own or complete. So that's the first C.
Yeah, but what I want to add to that too is like I'm reflecting on when I leave the office. That's like a big thing. It's like you said you were going to leave the office at 6, but I had to right. And so after a while, it becomes like, who knows when she's going to come and right. And it's I appreciate just thinking about that because it's like, well, yeah, but I'm doing all this work and it's for us and it's for the business. And but there's that feeling of, well, you don't respect the verbal agreement.
Yep.
And that feels icky. So it just being aware of that, I think it's really, really important. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, because there's rejection. There's all kinds of stuff that comes up for the other person when you're constantly breaking those commitments, right?
Yes.
And not being consistent. So that's a whole nother deeper separate interview, right?
So I'm hoping that you guys can reflect on the things that you may not have been consistent about and things that there are an opportunity to be consistent about, because I'm sure on the flip side is when you actually say, here, I am going to do this, I'm going to keep my promise. It probably just lays so much better when you actually do it. It's like a love language, in a way. It's an appreciation.
You've created your own social proof, right? Like you've proven based on your track record, you can trust me. It definitely matters on all the levels. And for you guys that are visual like I am, see this CATCH as a circle. Like just see it as wrapping around because it all leads into each other. The A is being aware. It's really being aware of who you are and what you're bringing to the table, flaws and all, right? Because we do a lot of this pointing to other people. Well, you did this wrong. You're not right here. And it's your problem. And you're the reason. But there's 3 fingers pointing back at you that we're always ignoring when we're doing all this pointing, right? Right? Like there's 3 pointing back, but we will, especially as women, because our brains are phenomenal, we will hold on to the microscope. The way you breathed that day was aggressive. And I didn't like the tone of your breathing, right? Like we will break down everything.
Anybody not like the tone of their breathing?
Right? When you're pissed off. Exactly. Like, I knew you were being sarcastic when you, right? Like we'll go all the way in. But what about with us? Like what was our demeanor? What was our tone that may have been a quicker reaction to something that we felt threatened by or and I don't mean threatened in a violent way, but just frustrated by something in our intimate conversation. What was it? Because sometimes, have you ever heard anyone in your life say, well, when you got upset, that really made me got upset. I wasn't upset the first time. I was just trying to share with you my opinion, but then your response made me go, right? And it becomes this ping pong. That never happened before. She's like, no, never. Not for me. Never. I've never been that person. But that happens, especially in our deepest, most intimate relationship, partially because that person feels like I'm the one you don't do this with, right? Even though they're the first person we typically give it to. Your forever love, when you're in an intimate, consensual relationship, or even in any kind of deeper, intimate relationship, your sister, girlfriend, your best friend, they feel like, well, you give that back talk, sassy, this, that, and the third, checking people. You do that for other people. That's not what we have to do with each other unless it's called for. So if they feel like it's uncalled for, there's a lot of dynamic that comes up, and you have to look at like, where's my responsibility in this? Is it that I'm triggered by something that Wanda said to me as my sister friend, and it brought up all this stuff for me, if Wanda's my lover, that it just triggered from that ex that I had 15 years before I even met you, that something about your voice just made me think about that fool. And now I'm right. Like what happened? So the A is really,
that awareness.
It's simple, not easy, right? Like being really aware of what your responsibility is in connecting with someone, right? And just being really aware of your flaws and all. The T is making time for love. Because a lot of the couples that we work with, they come to us exhausted. They are wildly successful, fast scaling, they're doing their thing, but they're exhausted from all the wild success that they don't want to sacrifice and trade it out. But by the time they get home, they don't have any room to be patient, to be nurturing, to be accepting. They're just like almost looking at things sometimes like a bullet point, like, dude, can you just get to the point here? Like, what are you trying to say? Okay, hurry up. Like it's a 15-minute meeting. Like, hurry it up. And with their kids and with their friends, and right, and Intimacy 360 and all the ways it shows up. But if you really want it, you have to make time for love, starting with loving yourself. If you don't have any me time, you are not going to make room, nor are you interested in making we time. Right?
Yes.
So time for love is crucial. So that looks like giving yourself blocks of time on your calendar for whatever you want to call it. I call it my permission to pause time, because it's pause for me looks like pausing and sometimes playing. If I want to do puzzles with just me or my kids or my husband, if I want to blow bubbles and wiggle my toes, whatever it is that I want to do, that time is for me to fuel up, not to problem solve my adult son's relationships, right? Like not to get into a conversation with a girlfriend that now turns me back into expert mode, because even though it was me time by the clock, if you're not actually selfishly focused on you, and I mean this in all the best ways, completely about how can I, this isn't a full glass of water, but how can I fill all the way up before I start pouring out? And that does mean being selfish and pulling away. And I know people say, well, it's not selfish to have self-care. Yes, it is. When you stop breastfeeding everyone else to take care of you, technically, you've just stopped everyone from accessing your drip, right?
Yeah.
Some people would say like, oh, how dare you? And you say, yes, how dare I? Take care of me so I can show up fully for you the next day, the next hour, the next opportunity. So I literally certify people in getting selfish, like do it for the purpose of filling up, not for your ego, not to crush people, not to make your forever love feel like they don't matter, but really so that when you have to be called on, you can come running like, yes, what you need, what you got, like you're when you make that time for love of yourself first.
And I could see that, because it feels like, oh gosh, okay, so I need to be consistent and aware, and I need to have time for love, but to provide that permission to say, well, part of it is for you so that you can have the energy and even the approach to feel good about giving to others and not feel like resentful of it, because it's like, well, I'm giving to you, but I got nothing. I had no time for myself. And you actually don't you have a community? Oh, you're certified selfish.
Certified selfish.
Yeah. So tell me about that. And then obviously we'll get back to the CH, but this seems like it's aligned with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So certified selfish is for married women entrepreneurs and a few great men. We call them brilliant beauties. When they come in, everything that we're talking about is the advantage of intimacy. Not only with yourself, but we step it out. So a lot of our conversations when we do our weekly Intimacy Advantage TV, which is similar to Rocket Fuel, when we do that every week, sometimes we're bringing in a guest expert to share how they're applying, the advantage of intimacy in their life, their love, and their business. Most of the time, it's me bringing tips. So earlier today, we just, it's usually on Thursday, but because Zoom wanted to be ridiculous, and so did StreamYard yesterday, we did it this morning on Fearless Friday. But when this morning's intimacy conversation was all about crushing negative self-talk, right? Like, because in order for us to be more intimate with ourselves, we have to look at like what's preventing us from loving ourselves as deeply as we should. Because if it's preventing you from really loving all of you, acknowledging you, celebrating you, feeling good without constantly moving on to the next ambitious endeavor and being busy instead of being productive, if you're constantly doing that, it's really hard for you to make space for quickies in the middle of the afternoon, right?
Right.
That you want and actually enjoy versus feeling like it's a chore.
Right.
Or, you know, wanting to have romantic midnight picnics, knowing that you're physically tired, but you've been looking forward to this all day because
Yeah.
that 15, 20 minutes, depending on how old they are, you know, whatever that time frame is, that, you know, depending on what's going on with you and your body and your libido, that time is so enduring and juicy and protected for you that you're actually exhausted physically and mentally. You are riving up because you're like, it's almost midnight, right? Like, you're excited about it. You're not going to be able to do that if you're not dealing with your negative self-talk, your imposter syndrome, your burnout, your exhaustion, the fact that you may don't trust yourself. Like, all those things are kind of the topics and subtopics we're talking about in the group.
I mean, it's huge to be able to have community around this because, you know, as we sit here and absorb all the wonderful knowledge that you're dropping, and if we can catch when we walk out of here, then you need to put it into practice, right? And it's tough when you don't have people around you that may have similar objectives, right? And so now you're like, okay, I remember that this was important for me or whatever. And community is so critical, not only to remind you, but to stay connected with those people that are aligned with you, and accountability. You know, we were talking about like videos and showing up and sharing. And I mean, I think this is important all the time, but tell me, oh my goodness, I want to ask, like, when is the time that an entrepreneur kind of approaches you? Like, when's that like trigger point where they're finally like, oh, I need somebody like Naketa?
Yeah, they're usually stuck in the loop, which actually is a great kind of pivot to the other C and the H for catch. So the first C was being consistent. The A was awareness. The T was time for love. That second C is communicating your needs to the other person, which starts with being to be able to be honest with yourself of what you really want. And they typically come to me when they're struggling with that C. They're having a hard time being heard. A lot of the men don't feel seen and appreciated and validated, especially with these really ambitious women in their lives, right? Like, and they're ambitious and phenomenal, you know, in their own right. But when you're really ready to prioritize, because you've been beasting for 10 plus years and you're like, okay, let's focus on enjoying some of the fruits of this success. You want to be able to have space with that person. And then one or both of them feel like they're not being heard. So that communicating of needs comes up a lot. And we can take this physical. If I can't communicate to you, my lover, Wanda, how I like to be touched and all of that, then our sex is going to be horrible, which is going to make our normal over tea communication horrible, because I have this awkwardness building up with me that I wasn't able to share with you what I really needed. And then we get stuck in the same loop argument over and over and over again. I'm sure some of you listening to this have had the same argument with your mate over and over about something, whatever it is. So they usually come to me there. And then the H, to wrap this with a bow, is really honoring the agreements, coming right back to being consistent. Honor your agreements. Just honor them. If you can't do something anymore and you promised it 4 years ago and you're a different person now with different needs, then communicate that so you can honor the new level of this agreement that you're trying to move into as you're deepening connection with yourself and also with the other person. We call that intimacy squared. So that's all that is.
Yes, that's huge. So you feel like the point, like, what is somebody experiencing when they finally realize that they need to delve into this? You know, you said that the trigger point is like, okay, I need to be able to communicate my needs, but what are some of the symptoms of not having communicated the needs, like the pains that you're experiencing?
Yeah, if it's just the woman per se, like the married woman, typically sometimes they come and they just want to work directly because they want to do their own self-healing because of how it's showing up in their relationship, they're not like our couples and our individuals don't come to us when they're 2 seconds from divorce. That's not when they come to us. If they do, we usually refer them to one of our power partners to work through those levels. They come happy. They're like, we have a happy marriage, right? We got the picket fence, the 2.5, whatever. Like we have all the measurements of success on paper and off paper. But at home in our bedrooms, we feel like roommates. We feel like we're all about the business, and we handle the business now. Like we get run circles around the neighbors down the street when it comes to handling the business of our house and of our businesses and families and all that. But that's all their conversations are. They're not really connecting and communicating the way you did when you first fell in love with someone, when you could have sex in the drop of a hat. You were willing to be adventurous and curious, and you could just stare at each other for hours and not say anything and listen to each other breathe, and you felt good about it. There's no more room for that, and they miss that because they're usually aging into another part of their life, and they're in their kind of life milestones, not by their chronological age, where they've done all the things, they've sacrificed everything, and they're like, I want it all. I want more than just being happy on paper and technically having all the boxes, those lists we used to write. You know, I need the person to look like this, be like this, have this, right? They checked all their boxes, or at least enough of them where they feel like they've hit the space of success that way, but they're missing whole success. They want to feel like that on the inside. So that's usually what's coming up for them.
Anybody watching have any comments on that? I'm sorry, I'm just laughing. I see Michael saying 2 minutes, but that's when we were talking about the little the romp.
I'm like, listen, you can do a lot in 2 minutes.
I'm sure you can.
We can talk about that, honey. No judgment. We can do a lot in that 2 minutes.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. So I just have to add that he always brings amazing humor to everything. Okay, so they've reached that point and they're like, okay, things are good. We've kind of achieved this, and this, but now it's almost like being the work couple working together, or even having other people look at them as a power couple.
Yes.
It becomes like a job that in of itself. And then you realize like, okay, there are the softer things of the foundation of your relationship that are not there. So it's great to know that they're not in a position of being broken. They're in a position of saying like, I could do better. We could do better.
Yes, they have the awareness, because we say we only work with the willing and the ready. So you have to be willing to admit that things are not utopia, because I mean, for who? Where is there a utopia if you're in a relationship with another human being, right?
Yes.
Because there's constantly things happening. So they have to be willing to kind of admit that everything is not perfect.
Yes.
And be ready to do the work, starting with themselves. Because even with our power couples, we bring them together in a 1-on-2 session, but we do self-healing work with them individually. There are people who didn't even know they had trauma stories that were in them, and they didn't realize 30, 40, 50 years later, it's showing up in their relationship until we start doing the work. And we're like, oh, that's where that thought of I'm not enough came from, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's go in. So it's being projected for some women very aggressively on their partners. For some men, they're pulling all the way back and they're just like, you know what? I'm gonna just let her have that understanding of happy wife, happy life, which is not true.
Right.
Right. Like we both have to have our own happiness and come together to make each other greater, and also support each other if one or the other is, needing some more support in the middle of a breakthrough to the next level of themselves.
So if somebody says, well, this sounds like therapy, like what's the difference?
Yeah, we get that all the time. So in my therapy hat, that's dealing with the root of dysfunction. So there is a lot of that. We got to get to the root so we can pull that sucker up and it doesn't keep creating toxic patterns in our lives, right? So the therapeutic part of all of my expertise and background is there. And when we hire other success architects, is what we call our accountability advisors, they do have to have human behavior in their background. Like not having that is not acceptable for us. That's part of the requirement. We
Mm.
can coach them on the coaching, but the human behavior part, they have to have some awareness of it, psychology or some level of that in some way. But where the coaching kind of portion of the breakthrough success coaching comes is we're not staying in the roots. Like a therapist is supposed to be with you in your process as long as you need to be there, and helping you see and unveil and kind of, look at what's going on for you. But if you want to stay, or not want to, let me apologize for that. If you need to stay in the experience of the trauma for a while because you're still having flashes and there's all kind of symptoms and issues that are coming up for you, they stay there with you and just give you tools to support you in the process. Where a coach questions your questions about why you're still in this when you have all these other things going on, and kind of helps to nudge you forward, not by giving you the solutions, because the person that fixes you is the person you resent, right? But by co-creating those solutions with you so that you can pull yourself up out of that kind of rooted survival mode faster, and you can begin to thrive in whatever that area is that you were kind of stuck on idle in before. So the blending of it all comes together. But it does. People tell me all the time, I feel like this was entrepreneurial therapy. And I'm like, sure.
Well, the fact that you have that unique background obviously is great, because if you need to go there and put that hat on, you can. Yeah. But the difference is that you are providing that forward momentum. And it is true that in therapy situations, especially, I remember when Michael and I proactively went into therapy when I was going through fertility challenges. And it was like, you know what? This is going to be tough. There's no question. How could we not experience issues and challenges as a result? So let's proactively, before we have any issues, it could be better, right? It could be better than us going through it alone. And so we would go through those therapy sessions. But what was interesting is, as an entrepreneur, I was looking for that. Okay, I understand we're here, but like, let's get some momentum. So what's my exercise so I can move forward?
Where's my accountability homework?
And so that's not, so it is true that's a difference. And I noticed it because my mindset was, in that way, and being an entrepreneur, I wanted to be like that. So I think that there are times where it's appropriate to say, you know what, you may need some more work. And have you ever had clients where it's like, it seems like you need some more in-depth work, and then you kind of transferred or, recommend a partner that can help them with that more in-depth work?
That happens all the time. So I don't believe in competitors. I only have potential collaborators, right? So I have a nice, tight network of subject matter experts and strategic partners. So if I'm working with someone who's discovering there's a different sexual identity for them that they weren't necessarily aware of before, they hadn't communicated with themselves, let alone their partner, I'll bring in one of my favorite people in the world, a Sacred Walker from Kumba Healthcare. She's amazing, based out of New York. I'll bring her in because LGBTQIA is her expertise. And she also is a clinician by background and a coach. So we have so many things in alignment, and I'm qualified to do all the things. But I don't want to when I have someone who does that all day long, that can go deeper, so I can bring them in, or sometimes just refer them. If it's depending on how egregious the situation is, I can refer them out and we can pause our work together.
And I think this is huge because I believe executing with excellence is also understanding your lane and where it's appropriate to transfer to another expert, right? If you want people to honor your expertise, then you have to honor other people's expertise. And of course, I mean, obviously when we're serving people and supporting people, everything's intermingled. So you're going to have some conversations about this and that, but it's nice to hear your awareness of saying, okay, if it gets too deep here, it's not like I'm not going to replace that. I will let you know when I think, in my professional opinion, you should start some more work here, and then you could probably interweave it together. And the reason being is because I don't want people to feel, I think personally, this is my personal opinion, that there's a greater chance that in therapy, a therapist will not suggest that you also integrate a coach into your life.
Sometimes,
you
yeah,
know, I
yeah.
find that they're less, and I'm hoping, and I'm seeing like a transition where
Mhm.
coaches and therapists are kind of helping to clarify their
Mm.
lanes and
Mhm.
see how they can help each other, right? But I
Yeah.
find more coaches aware of where their line ends and where they should,
Yeah. No,
make those recommendations.
you're 1,000% right. Even coming into this, our companies will be 10 years old in May. And when I came into the world of entrepreneurship, once I got kind of introduced to coaching outside of like being an athlete and needing coaches that way, like nutrition coaches, endurance coaches, that kind of thing, I looked at coaching very side eye because being a snob of human behavior,
Yeah.
I was like,
Like,
yeah, I was like, you guys are like wannabe therapists. Like, what's happening here? Like, you want all the accolades of, building relationship with people and having them open up and be vulnerable, but you don't want to do the deep work. Like, you're afraid to go in that because every coach I met was really quick to be like, oh no, if it gets to this point, they just need a therapist, right? And I was like, well, how does that work? Like with honoring your expertise and not throwing people away, right? Versus saying, okay, I need to bring someone else in, whether they work with your company or not, and being able to partner with that. And as I became more aware that coaching was definitely not therapy light, and I got educated on what the coaching industry was, and I'm a nerd, so I did all the research and all the things.
I love your nerdy.
Right?
Your nerdy is showing.
That's right. I started to do that and become more aware. I was like, all right, there are always outliers, right? There's people who are going to be the worst at whatever they're doing and not have integrity. And there's people who are going to be so loosey-goosey that they can't make a decision. But if you, pun intended, find the balance in between, you can become that person, that coach. For all of you who have coaches or have been coached or are interested in coaching, is that balance of knowing, yes, you can do all the things, but where is your zone of genius best suited for? If your zone is really, in my case, personal development, relationship, yes, I'm a business strategist. I could talk about, we've had a business for 10 years, full time, fully invested. We could talk about all that.
And by the way, with your husband, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about this, but you actually, you run the business with your husband as well.
He's 49% owner. He's a share owner. He's co-founder.
49%.
Look, we have to be women owned, right? Like, that's the thing. And we've gone through all of the transitions of the shiny syndrome of like, oh, this will be good. So, oh my God, why did we make this decision to be in this together? Right? Yeah. Like, what were we thinking?
What are you guys feeling? And for anybody that's watching, obviously, if you have questions, I mean, we have her live, but you could always obviously text for her her contact information and information about the selfish community or certified selfish community, all that jazz. But if you have questions or comments or things you want Naketa to touch upon, then please make sure to put them in the comments as we're breaking it down. We got 9 minutes left, but
I'm loving Michael's comments, by the way. I just saw a couple of hilarious. Yes.
For my wife and I, it's all about respect and strength, which is very nice. But before he said, he said the 2 minutes, he said in my youth I was 3 minutes.
I am dying right here.
Oh my goodness. It's wonderful. But it's great to be able to, have that, be able to have that open conversation and humor around it to kind of create some comfort level when you're talking about things that are, uncomfortable. What I find interesting is that, I mean, clearly you can help more than just entrepreneurs, right? So,
definitely.
But what is your current mix in clients? Do you work with corporate more, like large corporations? Do you work with small business owners more? What's the mix there?
Yeah, so we could do all the things, right? And we have, the first probably 8 years of our 10 was definitely, if you were a high level performer, regardless of your title, high level executive, high level entrepreneur. And we said high level because you understood the stress of multitasking with, having to manage other people under you and all the layers of what that relationship looked like prior. We recently sub-niche into entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial spirits who might even work in corporate as intrapreneurs, but they have like those, what we were talking about earlier, those kind of micro businesses within the company because they run their own
like
silos,
division or whatever.
And they kind of own, they own those budgets, they own all of it, very similar to how an entrepreneur is responsible for maintaining it and being fiscally responsible and all those things.
So sometimes you work with just the individual, just the one person, and then other times you work with both. Or is it more?
It's more. So power couples are always together. Occasionally, which we don't do much of, we only take about 3 to 5 women a year. We'll work with that woman or that brave man individually if they want to do their own solo self-healing work and they're not comfortable doing it in a group. But we do have the Unbound Brilliance Lab, which is specifically for our married women entrepreneurs that want to focus on them. They just like, let me focus on me. Like, yes, I'm in relationship. Yes, I have relationship issues we need to hash out in the safe, confidential, private, sacred community of other women who can relate to that because they're also with a forever love. But it's about me. Like, it is about my imposter syndrome, my self-doubt, my 1 minute I was excited, but I didn't give myself a second to celebrate it because I immediately had to go into the 5,000 roles I have when I have home and not feeling like I have any space for myself and dealing with that. So our UB lab, as we affectionately call the Unbound Brilliance Lab, that's our whole success incubator for women who are really ready to truly work on themselves. And then we can parse out to the lover in their life and go from there.
Interesting. So is it fair or common to have a woman be part of your UB lab, and then there's like particular events or activities where you would bring their partner together and hopefully maybe even retreats as we're able to go?
That's actually that's a part of the UB lab. This year it'll look a little different because of the disruptive, unsolicited gift of COVID for 2020. But we do have a work, life, and love retreat. That's a 3-day retreat for the women in the lab to bring their forever love with them too. We just got to be tricky about the timing with that. But
my goodness, that is wonderful. That's really cool. Does anybody have? I can imagine. So remember, I mean, if you want Naketa's contact information in this, she has information about her certified selfish community. And I thought you brought up the UB lab in here somewhere. I thought it was the case. I don't know, but she had some wonderful tips. I always ask our experts to give us a little rocket fuel, right? Some advice that she would typically reserve for her paid clients. And she gave just some wonderful tips on how to interact with your power couple partner. And I'm just going to let you peek there. And then that's it. Text to receive it. And if you are listening to this internationally, I didn't mention this before, you could text RF-103 to 1-909-741-1321. Okay, that works for international, or for some reason, Sprint US, I don't know, doesn't like 411-321, doesn't like short codes sometimes. So you can do that for Sprint US as well. But I highly recommend, if any of this resonates with you, learn more about Naketa, about the wonderful things that she does. Now, is the selfish community, certified selfish community, is that free, or is that?
It's free and private. So there's a couple of questions, the little gatekeeping questions to make sure you're going to come in and be respectful, because people are showing up fully and sharing information that, they don't want blasted on Facebook. So free and private.
That's fair. But that's an amazing opportunity for them to, obviously we have a great idea of who you are and just how comfortable you naturally make people feel about talking about these topics. So it's a gift that you have chosen to really use that zone of genius to help others, period. I think what's really unique for entrepreneurs is, entrepreneurs are trying to impact the world, right? So what's interesting is, in doing that work for a power couple, there's so much residual impact on how they interact with their employees and how they can better serve their customers and obviously have better home lives. So what amazing, just extra beautiful vibe you're giving into the world. And I want to thank you. Oh, thank you so much for your time. Oh my goodness, we could be talking and talking and talking forever. I keep on saying this. Please, please, guys, if you're interested, make sure to text for catchword. And for those of you that don't know that a part of my company, catchwords.com, we create these catchwords. If you are a speaker, an expert, somebody who loves to share their expertise like Naketa does, right? There are so many anonymous fans. I know you guys out there are like, have the twinkle in your eye. You're like, woo, that was juicy. I want more, right? And then we forget to follow people on Facebook and Instagram or whatever. So this is your opportunity now to at least commit to saying, I want to learn more. It will be in your email inbox, and you could read up on it, and hopefully you'll follow up in actually engaging with Naketa more. If any of this resonated with you, and if you desire to up level your power couple relationship and experience. Any final words, my darling?
Yeah, I would say beyond being honored and so grateful for you having me here, is just keep in mind whether you decide to work on yourself individually for your own self-healing or decide to do it in communion with your forever love, it's all about building a stronger unit, a stronger family. Because when you are phenomenal together, imagine how much more you can be impactful in the world and ripple that into every connection and interaction you have. You become an exponential gift for other people when you're fully whole and healed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then I'm going to throw a money thing to remember, if you are an entrepreneur, this is a business expense.
Yes.
Right.
Definitely.
I mean, some people feel they don't realize that working on themselves, especially services that are related to energy management, spirituality,
That's
relationships, all of that stuff, this affects your business.
Yes,
and it is totally a business expense. No question. Right. So I think I don't know. I say that in the sense that I feel that there's this hesitation with investing in something that's personal, right? Like, oh, I get personal benefit of it, whatever. Well, you know what? When you get personal benefit of it, so does your business, and so do your clients and your customers. There's that like residual effect for that. So I just wanted to remind for anybody who was kind of thinking like, oh, this is nice, but I need to invest in search engine optimization or whatever, like this is really a critical part of relationship building in general.
I'm glad you said that.
Beautiful work, Naketa. Thank you so much for sharing why you are hashtag Rocket Fuel. And we do this expert spotlight every Friday to allow you guys to better understand who is in this amazing group. Okay. My objective was to unite these people that like to execute with excellence, right? If you are interested in being interviewed, please feel free to direct message myself or Jessie Cole. You know that she is our group manager, and she's fantastic. And we'll try and tell your story. Okay. So please, if you're not on an expert spotlight, we still need to know who you are, what you do. And I encourage you to share it within the community. I even more so encourage you to show your face and to share a video so that we can get to know each other better. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much, Naketa.
Thank you.
Bye.